Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live stream on this special October 15th. It is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Day, and I've scheduled this special live event to bring together anybody who has experienced losses or wants to connect around this topic. It is not the easiest, lightest topic, but we're going to be focusing on bringing love and light and healing to this area of our lives together here. So I'm so glad you could join me. I'm Dr. Natalie Masson. I'm a psychologist, and I'm a voice behind the Fertility from the Soul meditations that you find on this channel. Please take a moment to, if you're here live, let me know who is here. Where are you logging in from? Hello, Amy. Nice to see you here. I see some of you are here from my private Facebook group and from my Conceive with Ease membership program. So don't be shy. I'd like this to be an interactive experience, not really much for just talking at a screen. So please do chime in. Let me know where you're here from. And if you'd like to share a little bit, let me know what brings you here, what inspired you to come and join this talk today. Okay, so you're in the UK, wonderful. And I want to mention also that there are two events today. There's this live stream here on YouTube, and then in 5 hours at 8 p.m. Eastern time, I'm also hosting a candle lighting circle to come together to honor our losses and to bring a light to our healing process. So that is going to be a private event on Zoom. And there's a link below the description here that'll take you to where you can register for that. That is a free event, and that will be at 8 p.m. Eastern. I know that's not good for those in Europe. Hopefully you will all be sleeping. But for those who are in the US or those who are on the other side of the world in Australia, Asia, New Zealand, that was why I scheduled 2 time slots, actually, because I know that we can't reach everybody at the same time. Okay, let's see who else is here. Exciting. Shukriya, hello, I'm from Canada. You're amazing. Thank you so much. So glad you're here. Hi, Erin. Love and light to all on this difficult day from Raleigh, North Carolina. Yes, North Carolina. You were up early with me on a 5 a.m. call in our membership program. You are a trooper, and you're back here too. And Sue, hello, Sue. Nice to see you. Colleen, I'm glad you can make it from Connecticut. Sue from London. Anna, hi Anna in Connecticut, yay. And Elisa from Pennsylvania. Welcome all. Let me go through and just give you a little bit of an overview of what I have in mind for today. I'm envisioning this taking about half an hour. I'm notorious for going over time, so that might go to an hour and a half, but hopefully we'll try to keep it tight. I know everybody has busy schedules. So I want to talk a little bit about why we have an event like this, and I'll tell you a little bit about my background and my connection to healing practices and to this particular topic as well. And then I want to talk a little bit about grieving in general, how we think about it, how that's been framed for us, and then the particular unique things about grieving a pregnancy loss. So there are a lot of nuances that are not the same as other types of losses. Each type of loss has its own features, right? So we'll talk a little bit about specifically about pregnancy losses at the different stages of pregnancy. And then I'd like to go into some thoughts about how we can go about grieving. And this is varied. You know, there is no correct way. There's no right way for each person. People do not do it the same. And different losses you have, you'll grieve in different ways as well. So we'll just sort of be touching on the different things that people find helpful, some of the things to keep in mind. And then if you are going on to try to get pregnant again, there are some things to be aware of and to think about in that process, kind of the layering of trying to conceive again and processing grief, because processing grief usually isn't sort of this finite thing that, okay, now that's done, now I'm going to go to this part. Everything is sort of happening together in layers. And I will be sharing along the way different resources that can help you along in this process. Okay, let me glance back at the chat and see what is up there. Gowrie, hi, nice to see you here. Okay, and I really invite you to be, play in the chat, use it there as much as you want and feel comfortable, chat with each other. This is really about, as much about me offering my perspectives and guidance as it is about you sharing and connecting with each other as well. So feel free to use that chat and talk to each other as we're going through this. If you want to share about what brings you here, anything that you've been through, anything that's been helpful for you along the way, you're welcome to share that as well. Okay, so why are we having, why has there been a day designated to focus on something as painful as pregnancy or infant loss? And why are we bringing more highlight to it by talking about it today and having a special session later on with our candle lighting ceremony? There are lots of reasons why. Something so painful as this is easy to sweep under the rug and try to look past, not only for those who have been through it, but for those who are around those who have been through it. It's something that is, frankly, it's painful. Nobody says, oh, hey, I can't wait to share about this loss I'm going through, I have been through, or hey, you want to tell me all about it? How was that for you? It's not the kind of thing that's easy and light to talk about. So I think it's just our nature to want to kind of shy away from it. I know that's how it was for me before I had my own experience with loss. I just kind of wanted to, oh, there's that thing. I know that you're supposed to be aware of it and compassionate to others about it, but I didn't even really know how to support somebody and what to say and what that was like. So I think having a day of acknowledgement of this painful but very common experience helps to take away the stigma and open up conversations, and sometimes remind us that maybe there's some attention that we want to give to our own grief process, that through the hustle and bustle of life, maybe we've kind of been blazing through and haven't given full time and attention to honor and process the things that we've been through. So that's kind of part of my thought about having this special session today. And it's also just to help as a community, as women, as people, having the courage to speak of these things that are difficult and painful, but knowing that being able to share and connect and be knowledgeable about things is an important part of the healing process. So if we're too timid about it and we're afraid to speak out, share what we know, share what we've been through, I don't think we're necessarily doing the best by each other. And of course, it's up to everybody how much you want to open up that vulnerability. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's not your obligation to be out there about the difficult things you've been through. It's something that can be helpful to open up more widely, and sometimes it's really helpful to keep it very private. And I'll talk about some of the nuances that I've noticed about that. So my background is in psychology. So just to step back and differentiate, psychiatry is focused on medical training, prescribing medications. Psychology is focused on understanding the mind and the human experience, and therapists who have a psychology background are working with people through talk therapy and other non-medication approaches. So that is my background. I've had a private practice for about 18 or 19 years, and I just really love helping people through anything that I feel like I can be helpful with. And the more personal experience I've had in a certain realm, the deeper my understanding of what people's needs might be and how they might be helped. So I was in my mid-40s when I was going through my own fertility challenges and trying to have our second child. And I went through 2 miscarriages at that time, and then went on to have a healthy pregnancy. And through that time, it sounds a little bit corny to say I'm grateful for the challenges that I've been through because it taught me so much and made me who I am. But really, there's an element of truth to that. A lot of what I went through helped me understand much more deeply this experience that I never really would have been able to understand had I not gone through some of it myself. And there are many parts of the infertility struggle that I have not been through myself, and I can do my best to learn from hearing deeply other people's experiences. But I am actually, at this stage, grateful for the struggles that I had, because I never would have known on a very personal level what it could be like to experience these kinds of losses and struggles. So that's kind of what has motivated me in these last few years to take my knowledge as a psychologist and my own personal experiences to help women in an area that I think there's always room for more perspectives and more guidance. So many of you here have probably listened to my meditation recordings on this channel, and that's one of my favorite ways to reach people, because it's so accessible. You can just kind of plug in, take it in, and take with you whatever resonates for you. Okay, so I want to shift now to just checking in on the chat first, actually. Amy says, a beautiful book called Tear Soup helped me. I'm still making tear soup. That is a beautiful name of a book, and I will look forward to checking that out myself. Nino, hello from Finland. Hello, Nino. Welcome. Okay, so let's look at the landscape of the grieving process. I'm going to step through this very quickly because you've heard a lot of these things before, and I think we can kind of condense it down to some very basic components. So you've probably heard of the 5 stages of grief defined by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And it's important to understand that those are not meant to be in a series in order, but I would rather, instead of call them stages, I might call them aspects or phases or something. Like there are different layers that you're likely to encounter. And there's another framework based on a psychologist named John Bowlby's theories of attachment. And that breakdown covers 4 phases: shock and numbness, yearning and searching, despair and disorganization, reorganization and recovery. You can hear in both of those frameworks that the last category, in the first one it was acceptance, and in this one it's reorganization and recovery. It kind of reflects that there's this kind of painful, chaotic space that eventually, hopefully, ideally leads to a more peaceful space. And so I don't want to do the common psychologist thing. Psychologists tend to be very much up in their heads, intellectualizing and breaking down all these things and defining a bunch of stuff. I want to keep this a little bit more broad so we don't get up in our heads, and just call it, there's a period of trying to reconcile what just happened and how am I going to make sense and handle this. And that can be that soup. I'll use Amy's book title, that soup of all kinds of, anger, this isn't denial, this isn't really happening, what can I do to make this better, I give up, life is horrible, all these ups and downs, all these roller coasters. That's kind of the agitated process of trying to get to a more settled and peaceful place. So I'm going to make more of a 2-stage, just for simplicity of our brains, a 2-stage model of grief, being that there are these more uncomfortable, agitated phases, and then there are these moments where we can feel a little more peace and acceptance with where we are. And they're going to go back and forth. It's not this linear thing. It's just, I like that book title, Tear Soup. It's the soup of what happens when we have gone through something where, if we want to define loss in the most general terms, there was something that we no longer have that we wish we had, and that is a loss. So, it could be put it into most general terms, it could be you lost your favorite jacket. It could be you lost a job. It could be you lost a relationship. It could be you lost a person who's very near and dear to you, who has passed away. It could be you lost a pregnancy. It could even be a pregnancy never happened. That's another kind of grief that we don't actually even have a name for, that I think is important as well. In this, but I think the primary features are, there's something that we are not able to get control of, to have, or to get back. And there's this loss of control. Whatever has happened can't be undone. And so that can bring up a mixture of anxiety from not being able to control it, and depression from feeling helpless, that we can't make things better. And there's a pain around this. Maybe we didn't even know how important it was to us until we lost it. For example, sometimes someone gets pregnant accidentally and they're shocked. And they're, oh my gosh, this wasn't in my plan, what I'm going to do. Then a week later, they're having a miscarriage. And they're suddenly realize that that really was something that was really important to them. And now there's this grief of the thing that they didn't even know that that they longed for. They hadn't longed for until they, so there are all these different elements. But the common thing is we don't have control over, we can't make it come back. And it's something what we've decided is important and meaningful to us. So when it comes to pregnancy, we're going to focus in on pregnancy now. I want to just kind of walk through, in general, the different stages of pregnancy where the losses can happen, because they have different features to them. So the earliest one is called a chemical pregnancy. Sometimes abbreviated CP. If you're in online forums, CP is the abbreviation for chemical pregnancy. And I'm not happy with that term. Like a lot of terms in medicine, they have a strange ring to them, and they don't really reflect the experience of the person who's going through it. So chemical pregnancy sounds like there's a chemical involved and it didn't react right or something like that. I don't know. But all it means for our purposes is the pregnancy lasted a very short time. So you ovulate around the second week, end of the second week of your cycle. Implantation would happen around the end of the third week. And somewhere between 9 and 14 days, you start seeing a pregnancy test where implantation has happened and the HCG is rising. And then somewhere around the end of that fourth week, which is normally when you'd be getting your period, the HCG, the pregnancy hormone, starts dropping, and the pregnancy transfers into usually a period. Your period starts sometime right around, or maybe a few days or a week after your period would have started anyway. We call that a chemical pregnancy. That just means that for whatever reason, it could be many reasons, it got started very briefly and then did not continue. And then we move farther along to where we call any losses in the first trimester, farther into the first trimester, a miscarriage. A chemical pregnancy could also be called a miscarriage, but it's not quite as far along. So oftentimes that's just called a chemical pregnancy. And then farther along, we have our first trimester miscarriages, which are very common. They say maybe 20 or 25% of pregnancies end in the first trimester, because creating a life is an absolute miracle. There are so many things that need to come into alignment, and there are so many things that can be misaligned in that process. And so this is the point at which many pregnancies don't make it, because oftentimes chromosomes weren't aligned. Maybe there were things that couldn't be sustained in the various ways that the embryo needs support during that time. So, but after the first trimester, things are usually more established and more stable. Most pregnancies that get that far will continue on, but there are unfortunately losses in the second trimester as well as in the third trimester. So as you can imagine, as the time goes on, there's even more time for bonding, more time for planning, more time for expectations. And I think the farther we get along in the pregnancy, the more complicated and intense the loss and the grief can be. Although I don't want to set that expectation, that length of time is what determines the size of the loss and the size of the feeling about it. I know there was one woman in our membership program in particular who had a second trimester loss and then had a first trimester loss following that for different reasons, not related. And the first trimester loss was actually more troubling and traumatic because of things that happened around the miscarriage experience in the hospital and so forth. So it depends on a lot of factors how this is going to impact you. So I want to take a look at our chat for a moment here. Amy says, I resonate with the Bowlby thinking. Not sure how you spell his name. Bowlby. Yeah, I actually resonated with that one more too. It's interesting. The Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, 5 stages of grief, bargaining, denial, anger, depression, acceptance, just intuitively has never really super spoken to me. But when I saw the Bowlby one, I was like, oh, that actually sounds more like how I would make sense out of things in my own mind. And actually, it's kind of interesting. There's another little piece. I'll get to that later. I'm going to talk about the 6th stage of grief that's been added on to the 5 stages by another psychologist who actually was sort of a collaborator with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I'll come back to that a little bit later, though. Elisa, is this being recorded for later viewing? Yes, this is all being recorded, and it'll be available on replay. It usually takes a couple hours for YouTube to put it up on replay. Okay, so everybody just pause and take a breath together. We're getting into the meat of facing, throwing open the closet and looking at the monster in the closet. And I just want to acknowledge that it takes some courage to be able to talk about these things in the light of day. And I'm going to do my best to keep things kind of on the lighter level, but it's really impossible for us to talk honestly about all this without facing some of the difficult realities of a pregnancy loss. So I just want to kind of acknowledge everybody for being here, whether you're here live or you're watching in the replay. Just take a moment, because I'm guessing that most of you are here because this is personal to you. You've probably been through some kind of loss yourself. So just even hearing me talking about this is triggering memories in your head, things that you've gone through maybe a long time ago, maybe very recently, maybe you're going through right now. So, let's just pause for a moment, put that thinking brain aside for a second. And you might even just do this with me. Place your hands over your heart and just breathe into your heart space. Acknowledge yourself for coming here, for taking this time, for showing up for yourself, for your heart, for whatever hurts you've had in your heart, for any babies that you're wanting to take time to honor and acknowledge today. Okay. So I'm going to continue now, but give yourself permission anytime to kind of just take a little step back or take a break and come back. Like I just said, there's going to be a recording you can watch on the replay if you're here live, and just kind of pace yourself through this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I got a comment showing up. Somebody's sharing that she would have been due next month and this is on her mind. I'm glad you're here. I'm really glad you're here. Yeah. Okay. So some of the things that are unique about pregnancy loss versus other kinds of loss. One is that we don't always know who to talk to. And it's kind of common. I think there's a common understanding that we do better if we don't completely hold things inside and bottle them up. So it's a common recommendation, if you're going through something difficult, don't hold it in, find someone to talk with. But that's easier said than done. Who do you talk to about these things? Because people don't automatically understand and know how to support you through these things. And I discovered this myself. I used to not get why people said don't share until the end of the first trimester because you might have a miscarriage, so don't share. You know, I'm a psychologist. I'm big on, you know, the support you can get from sharing and opening up, not holding things inside. I was like, it's okay to share. You don't have to be embarrassed or ashamed if you have a miscarriage, and then people can support you if they knew that you were pregnant and you had a loss. And so I kind of had that assumption that, oh, people could just be more open and everything will be okay. Well, I found out after I had my first miscarriage and shared with people in my circles about what I was going through, that hearing what they had to say was not always what was helpful to me, even though not a single person had negative intentions. Just because they didn't really understand this experience and what it was I needed, they would say things that were meant to be supportive that were actually painful to hear. And I was so vulnerable. I would say like that first miscarriage was one of the most vulnerable times, like just like, it's like the world breaks open and something new emerges. Like could not even fathom what was happening. I mean, I knew intellectually what was happening, but like just crossing that bridge and going, this is happening. Emotionally, it was just such a huge like opening of vulnerability. And to hear people saying things, trying to be helpful, but just not, was something that could have done without. So my second time around, I did hold my cards closer. And when I did have the second miscarriage, there were only select people that I shared with, and that actually worked better for me. So it's a challenge to know who to talk to. And one of my recommendations is to be aware that not everybody is going to offer the support that in response that you want, and you can try to let people know how to support you, and you can also try to look for people who you know to be fairly supportive and understanding and good with these sorts of things in general. And online forums can be, like, for me, it was a huge lifesaver to be able to go into a place where I knew everybody here was okay talking about this, and they'd been through something like this before. So there was a level of common getting it. You know, I'm in the club now that I never wanted to be in, but it's nice to be in the club with other people who know what's going on. So online forums can be a resource as well, but it's not easy to know who to talk to. Another unique challenge, so that's a little bit different than more other forms of grief, where I think there's a little bit more general awareness about what a loss might mean. So, you know, if you lost your dog, you lost your family member, people have a little more awareness of what that means, and hopefully, not always, they may be able to respond in a more helpful way. So unique about pregnancy is it's really hard to know where you're going to get the response that's going to feel supportive to you. The other thing that is unique about pregnancy loss is it's a little bit hard to define for other people and sometimes for yourself exactly what was lost, because it's this thing that people couldn't quite see, especially if it's an early loss where nobody could even tell you were pregnant. And there was no baby to hold, you know, it's a cluster of cells, it's an embryo, it's a fetus, you know, it's like, how do you define, how do you say what was lost? A lot of what we've lost at that point is our sense of a connection with a soul. It's our expectations about what's to come. We can become very attached to our plans, all the dreams that we have. So sometimes it's hard to say, it's hard to explain to others and even to ourselves, what did I actually lose? Wait, what just happened? You know, especially if it was very short, like you've only had a pregnancy for 3 days and then it's all blowing up on you. How do you even tell somebody how devastating that is when it was so short? It's hard to explain, but it's valid to have whatever feelings you're having about it, depending on what is meaningful to you. Another part that really gets glossed over to me is the physical part of what happens after there's a pregnancy loss or during a pregnancy loss. We tend to talk about this thing of miscarriage and loss in this very tidy way, like, okay, you were pregnant, it didn't work out, and then you were not pregnant. what about what happens right there in the middle between pregnant and not pregnant? Who talks about this until you're there? Nobody talks about this because a lot of obvious reasons. It's not comfortable, it's painful, it varies a lot what happens. I had no idea, and I hadn't even questioned it before my first miscarriage. I don't know, I just conveniently imagined that when someone has an early miscarriage, like first trimester loss, it like vanishes or something. Y'all here who've been through something, you know, that's not true. And just vanish. Sometimes it's so early that it's just like another cycle started. But even if you're only 6 weeks in, that means you've only been pregnant for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. There's a process, and there's very little guidance on what this looks like, how to do this, who to talk to again about this. That creates complications, and there isn't a simple and easy way for that transition to happen. Sometimes it happens naturally, and sometimes you have to make choices about procedures. And so these are all things that we don't prepare each other for, because nobody really wants to prepare somebody for something that may never happen. Like, you know, say, oh, congratulations, you're pregnant. Here's a pamphlet on what to do if things don't work out in the next few weeks. No, we don't go there. We don't find out until we're in that moment. And we're not only dealing with the emotionally crushing reality that somebody I thought was going to be a child is not anymore. I'm not, you know, going to have all these things. But now we have to figure out what to do physically. And that is complicated. You know, there's so many things that I hope will change through having conversations like this and opening up the dialogue more about how we can do better by all women to provide more support and guidance around these uncomfortable but very real parts of our experiences. The other piece that's unique to pregnancy loss is the postpartum effects. So postpartum, we think about after, at the end of a pregnancy, after birth, all the hormones and everything, that's happening when you have a pregnancy loss too. All those hormones that ramped up for pregnancy are now figuring out where to go, because there isn't a new life to support, and you still have this flood of hormones. If it's a very late term loss, your body's preparing for breastfeeding. There are all these things that your body has to sort out that add to the complications of going through this difficult time. Another piece, there's a lot of unique things. Wondering what went wrong. So we're not just trying to figure out, oh, we had a loss, how do I cope with this? But we're wondering what happened. What happened? Did I do something? Is this going to happen again if I try again? So now there's this other layer of just wrapping our heads around it, but also trying to figure out on a practical level, what should I be doing? What should I be doing to prepare for next time? And a lot of, because miscarriage is so common and often it's something random like a chromosomal abnormality, I feel like the medical community tends to be very dismissive of the what went wrong question. They want to just go, oh, miscarriages are really common, just try again. And if you have 3 of them, then we'll start doing repeat loss testing for you. You can probably guess I have some biases about that, about whether you should really have to go through 3 losses before you explore more if there are things beyond randomness that are causing your loss. So you have this next stage of trying to figure out, did I do something wrong? What did I go wrong? And then trying to get support from people who might be able to help you figure it out. What did go wrong? Is anybody resonating with these things? Let me know in the chat if these things, these unique pregnancy loss complications are resonating with you. I'm going to look at the comments here. Nino says, I've not talked about it to anyone. The problem is that sometimes there are some events that make revival the moments, and I start to cry and nobody understands what's happening to me. Yeah. And this is the thing about emotional wounds, is they don't go away because we don't talk about them. They just stay there. And I'm going to get into this next section real soon about what are things we can do to move forward. And, I'm sorry that you have not been able to talk, and I hope that you're able to find a place where you can work through this and process this. It sounds like it's just the emotion is so high that you can't even get to being able to articulate and get the support that you need here. Okay, lots of acknowledgments that this is resonating. Great. Okay, where are my notes here? Okay, this is a difficult list for me to walk through, all the unique characteristics of pregnancy loss, because I know I'm just kind of like shaking salt on the wound of all the pain, but I also hope that it's just giving voice to these things that most people don't want to talk about, because for that very reason, it is painful, right? It is painful. But I hope that you can sense that despite the challenges, despite the difficulties, look, we're all here right now. We get up, we lick our wounds, we figure out how to move forward. And by being able to have these frank conversations, I believe we're going to be able to better move forward than by keeping it all kind of quiet because it's so icky and hard to talk about. Okay, so I'm going to get into a couple other categories of what can be unique about pregnancy loss. These are really tough ones. How many know the acronym TFMR? This is a hard one. If you know this one, you see it on forums and your heart breaks, because that stands for termination for medical reasons. So this is when a mother has to make a decision because something is going terribly wrong with the development of the baby, or it could be something is going on for mother that doesn't allow her to continue the pregnancy, and a choice is made to terminate. And, how complicated is that, right? How complicated is that to have to take that decision into your own hands? I find it similar to having to make a choice with somebody who is in the hospital and terminally ill and suffering, like making the choice to remove support. And when you do that, and who makes that decision? It's just very, very hard, very painful. And we need to have a lot of compassion for anybody who has had to make those very difficult decisions. Another category that I think is complicated is if there was some kind of accident, slip and fall. I know a couple of people who lost babies in their second trimester from a slip and fall accident, and grappling with that sense of responsibility and the pain of the loss. So, there are just so many layers that can go along with this. And often also when you don't know what happened to the pregnancy, when there is no diagnosis for what happened, it can be easy to get stuck in the wanting to know and also blaming yourself. Like, what did I do? Let me think. Oh, was it that Pilates class that I did? Oh, maybe it was because I, went in a hot tub when I was 4 weeks along, or, all these kinds of things. We start questioning and doubting what our role might have been. So with all that in mind, I really want to keep coming back to compassion for ourselves as women, for ourselves and our maternal hearts, that we want nothing more than to be able to care for our babies and to nurture them and have them be healthy, and to be confronted with these challenges it's really difficult, but it is part of the maternal pathway, that if we're going to allow ourselves to go down this path of creation, we are opening ourselves up to the pain of loss as well. So I think we can just really have compassion for ourselves, our own human condition, and offer that compassion to each other. Okay, now we're going to get into ways of moving through grief. How do we do the grief process? And I'm going to break for just one moment, because I know with these live streams, people are jumping on and off, and I want to make sure that everybody who is here live is aware that there's going to be a private candle lighting circle in about 4.5 hours on a Zoom call where we'll all get to actually see each other and connect and chat together and light candles together. If that interests you, look in the description below this video and you'll see, I think it's one of the top things after the description, one of the top things right before it says resources. There's a link there. You do need to register. It's free. You do need to register for it so that I can email you. I'll be emailing out the links to join that a couple hours before the event starts. Okay, so, and that is related to this next section of how do we do this process? And like I said before, there is not a right or wrong way to do it. It's going to look different for each person and for each kind of loss that you've been through. You'll grieve different losses in different ways depending on what is meaningful for you. And I'd say if I were to put it into the right and wrong categories, what I would like to see people not doing is just stuffing it all, putting on a brave face and not dealing with it at all, because I really believe that those pains do need attention. They need healing attention. And if we don't take care of them, they just get stuffed down. And I do think that they cause emotional and physical problems later down the line. So that's my recommendation to you as I go through a variety of ways that you might process what you've been through. Any of them might be useful to you, but the one that what my hope is that you'll find something that's useful for you, because I really think that stuffing it is not a good long-term strategy. It might be fine short-term. I think it's actually okay at different times to not deal with it at all, but to circle back around and as you're ready to deal with it and process it over time. Okay, so when I think of any kind of pain and suffering in life and how we can be resilient with that, how we can survive that and grow and thrive, the important element is that we're giving our emotions nurturing, healthy attention. And the kind of attention, it's actually a fairly simple concept when you boil it down to its core components. And I think the most important concept is, the most important component is to give your emotions kind attention, not trying to fix them or change them, trying to make them into something else or talk yourself out of it, but to just recognize the humanness of your emotional experience and to say, I hear you. Like you could talk to your emotions. And if you can find it in your body, not have it be intellectual, but in your body, if you can find that emotion in your body, maybe it's in your heart, maybe it's in your belly, maybe it's in your womb, and say, I hear you. I know this is hard. Okay. To me, that is the essence of taking care of emotions in a way that allows us to be resilient. And so when I go through all the different ways that we can do grief, you're going to see that element in most of these. So we talked about one earlier, and that is talking to people. So if you can find supportive places to talk about what you've been through and have people hear you and understand you, what we're looking for is that same kind of response that you want to give yourself. I hear you, I understand you. It's so common for people to want to try to cheer you up and help you see things on the bright side. And it's really great if you can talk to people who can just hold space for you. And that's what therapists are often good for. It's to kind of train to do that. It's like, we're not going to try to sugarcoat it, make it all better, because we understand that it's just part of life is having these hard things going on. And it's so valuable to just hold space for that and go, I get it. I get how hard this is. What else do you want to tell me about that? So finding places where you can open up and express that can be really helpful. A couple caveats to that. If you're, two things here. One is you want to pace yourself in processing these things because it is intense. It takes a lot of energy. It's it can have a really big energetic impact to dive into these things and share them. So I really recommend taking your time and not feeling like, oh, it's something to do and get through and charge through or do until it's done, but rather to pace yourself and have moments of opening and then moments of closing where you say, no, I'm not going to talk about it this month or this week or this day. You know, it's October 15th, but this October 15th, I'm not going to talk about it because it's good right where it is. I don't want to open up that treasure chest right now. It's okay and it's healthy to have boundaries and not be focusing on processing the pains at all times. That can just kind of be too much. So we want to be able to open and close that processing experience. And with all of this sort of thing, we want to be validating our feelings, just saying, whatever you're feeling, it's natural, it's okay, and don't judge yourself because it's taking too long or there's such an early loss that it shouldn't be affecting you this much. These are all invalidations saying you're not supposed to feel that way. So the more you can say to yourself, yes, of course you feel that way and it's okay, the more actually your emotions can go, oh, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging me. And there's sort of this release when we stop fighting what we're actually feeling and say, it's okay. It's okay to feel really pissed off, really crappy, really depressed about this, and acknowledge that and see where that goes. Now, a couple other ways you can open up: journaling. Oh, nobody's going to argue back with you when you're journaling. You just write in your own journal, just getting out whatever you want to share. Meditating. There's many different ways to meditate, but it can be simply about having quiet time with yourself to just notice your breathing and not focus in on things so much, but just be present with the moment. We already talked about talking with a friend, talking with a therapist, online forums. These are all different ways that you might be able to let those emotions flow and get that validation and hearing that the emotions need. And it's really the acknowledgement and not arguing with the emotions that I believe helps with healing over time. So we talked a little bit about my very rough 2-stage model of working through grief, which is there's that chaotic part where you're trying to make sense out of it and it's agitated and you try and get your head around it and make peace with it. And then there's the, okay, here we are. I can move forward from here. Kind of separating into those two camps. And I think you can recognize, it's important to recognize when you're in the struggle bus camp and just recognize it for that. That it's, if you're really getting obsessed with what happened, what can I do to prevent this again? Oh my gosh, what did I do? If only, what if, all that stuff. If you can just kind of label that as, I'm struggling to accept this. I'm struggling to accept that I don't have control over this and this is what happened. Sometimes just acknowledging that that's what it's about helps us get off of certain obsession trains. Feeling jealous of people who are pregnant, feeling jealous of people who have babies, feeling angry, what happened, all these fall into the camp of, I'm hurting. I'm hurting, and it's hard to be with this. It's hard to accept and tolerate this. And when we can just wrap it all up and go, I'm hurting, I'm a human being, I have a mother's heart, I've had a loss, and I'm hurting. Right? Just simply acknowledge that. And sometimes that simple acknowledgement that this is just hard. We don't need answers. We just need to know that this is hard. So I'm going to check back in the chat and see how everybody is doing here. Okay, we've got a little bit going on that I want to read through. Okay. Amy says, I met some gorgeous sisters at a Wave of Light ceremony last year. We have set up a baby loss coffee morning. That is so sweet. Our coffee morning is called Us Too, and without hesitation, We include parents who have had TFMR, termination for medical reasons. Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Like just taking the initiative to create a circle of support like that. And Allie, hi Allie, she wanted to share something that you can say to someone who's experienced the loss. I'm so sorry that happened to you. No one should have to go through that type of pain. I hope you can get the support and comfort you need and deserve. I'm here if you need me. Yes, I like that. And actually I was thinking today when I was preparing for this, that eventually I want to make a whole video on what to say to people to support them when they're going through this. And that was a really good recommendation, Allie. Yes, okay, sorry, Little Miss Goldilocks, the candlelight ceremony is going to be at 1 a.m. your time. I'm sorry about that. I'm glad you can be with us here right now. Nino, 3 a.m. your time. Yeah, and that's exactly why I scheduled this also, because I wanted to be able to reach those in your time zone. So, okay, where am I? Like I said, this is going to be half an hour, but not really. Now we are at 50 minutes. So thank you everybody for hanging in with me. I hope this is helpful to you. We are finishing up the variety of ways that you can do the grief process. And so we're just talking about, recognize that a lot of the struggle energy is really just about, I'm hurting, I'm sad, this is painful, and it's hard to, I'm in the process of making peace with this. And that cuts away a lot of the agitation of what do I need to do about this? And say, okay, first thing I need to do about this is just acknowledge those feelings. Some people find symbols and rituals to be helpful. So the candle lighting ceremony, the wave of light that Amy talked about, these are rituals, symbols coming together. Some people will make a bracelet with a little symbol for any of the losses that they've had. Some people will commemorate on the estimated due date or the date of the loss. So I mentioned that I would talk about the 6th stage of grief that has been added in the last year. And the psychologist's name is David Kessler. He carried on the teachings of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and actually went through a very devastating loss just a few years ago. He lost his son. And so all of his life's teaching about teaching the stages of grief, he was living in real time, real living color. And he came to a conclusion that he wanted to add a 6th stage to the 5 stages of grief. And so there has been officially a 6th stage added on. And that 6th stage is making meaning, not just coming to a place of, okay, I've gotten my head around this, I'm accepting it, I'm at peace with it, but making meaning was something that he felt was very important as he was experiencing it in real time, saying, how can I take this loss and have it grow into something meaningful? So, very literally, that could be like planting a tree, and a tree has grown out of this. Or as I shared at the beginning, part of, my mission here is to take all the pain and the struggles that I've gone through and turn it into something I can help other people with. And I'm sure that's kind of mixed into there. I'm making meaning and creating purpose out of what I've gone through. So we have symbols, rituals, making meaning out of our experiences. And I also want to highlight the possibility and healing with time, and it kind of gets frozen in time. So when you realize that you have some trauma locked in your system, I think it's important to recognize that that's what's happening, and not just try to do this on your own, and not just try to talk about it and write about it and meditate on it, because that actually might just keep bouncing off. It might actually exacerbate it. So if we just talk about a traumatic event, we could be re-triggering it and revisiting it, relighting it up in a way that's not actually healing. So I like to bring this up because a lot of pregnancy losses have a traumatic element to them. They're intense anyway, but they can definitely carry on that locked in the nervous system kind of element to them. And there are specific therapeutic tools that we use to help people process traumas that I wouldn't recommend you try to do it on your own. You'd want to do it with a trained guide. So in my therapy practice, I use EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. There are many other methods of trauma processing that have been found to be effective. So I just want to put that out there. If you feel like you have that kind of re-emergence of a lot of intense feelings when you revisit your loss, or like somebody was saying earlier in the comments, every time she comes up, it's just so overwhelming. It really re-triggers. That to me is a sign of trauma, and that I would recommend working with a therapist who has tools specifically for processing trauma. And don't push yourself to do this on your own, because it might exacerbate things. Still do things that would be soothing, but don't push yourself to open up and talk about it to just anybody. I'd really recommend doing that with a trauma specialized therapist. Okay. Let me know in the comments if anybody has questions about that. Okay. Well, Miss Goldilocks, this is really helpful. Thank you. I'm so glad, yes, it is. Thank you. I'm so glad this is helpful. I find it difficult to understand people around me, how I'm struggling about the losses. This is why I close myself. Even my husband now is getting upset. Yeah. So people don't necessarily know how to be helpful at this level, and they're not supposed to know this. To me, that's a sign that I would really recommend talking to a professional that can help you with it, because it's not simple, and it's not as simple as if somebody listened to you enough, it would take care of it. Okay, so we don't want to expect that of people around us either. And if they're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling overwhelmed and you can't come together around it, I would really recommend bringing in some extra help. Yeah. Okay. And compassion to your partners too. The partners are going through their version of what this loss means, and that can have all of its own complexities. And the partners get very little support and attention around this. It's like it has nothing to do with them, but it does have a lot to do with them. They're your partner. This was their child too. Like, there's a lot going on there. That could be a whole other hour-long YouTube live. Okay. Let me get toward wrapping up here. Yeah, well, Miss Goldilocks, not everybody can understand, and that's why, that's what they need to understand, is that these are your emotions. Yes, these are your emotions. Sometimes it helps to tell people who want to be helpful, they don't need to fix it, that they can just hear you, and they feel helpless, like they want to make you feel better. And sometimes you can let them know, you don't need to fix it. I just want to be able to talk about it and cry and have that be okay. And sometimes people can rise to that occasion if you explain that to them. Okay. There were a bunch of recommendations that came up inside my private Facebook group. It's called Getting Pregnant Naturally. I've linked to that in the description also. I posted a question on the Facebook group: what has helped you find comfort and heal after losses? And a ton of great suggestions came up. And this is an example of what happens in a community of people who have been through things. And somebody shared a ceremony with my partner, annual candle lighting and prayer. I have my ultrasound picture framed, guided meditations and mantras, energy work, being kind to myself, allowing emotions to come to the surface, feeling all the feels, and then picking myself up again. Another person says, I named each one of my babies and wear a ring that is in the shape of a wave. To me, the wave is symbolic of their heartbeats. I can't say I'm healed, but it always gives me comfort to look down at my ring. Somebody else shared, be kind and loving to yourself and get help when needed. So you hear like so many wise women here, right? Saying the same things I just told you. They're discovering and sharing with each other. Also, for me to understand a bit better why I miscarried, it has made it easier to find hope. She found the book, Is Your Body Baby Friendly, to be helpful. I've heard good things about that book as well. Make a home in the breath. Give yourself time to grieve. Do something in their memory. Double down on self-care. talk about your lost babies. This is how I moved through sadness. I'm not going to name who that is because I didn't ask for permission to read these, but it's somebody here. You're welcome to identify yourself, somebody on the live stream here. That's beautiful. Somebody else shared, I had therapy for many years. After many years of bottling, that gave me confidence to make a better choice with diet and exercise. As I was very depressed, yoga and meditation really helped too. Someone else writes, I wrote a letter to my babies, then I buried it. After a while, I planted 2 trees, one for each rainbow baby. They are always alive and growing in my heart. Somebody else says time and talking about it. Somebody else said, it helped me to know that I could get pregnant naturally. Before the miscarriage, I was not even sure I could get pregnant. About a year later, I became pregnant with my rainbow baby. It helps a lot to talk about it. For me, the best I could have is support from and love from my friends and my husband, who said, we will try 100 times and will stick with us. Don't worry, just never give up. Yeah, so faith and trust in God and my husband's support. Lots of really wise and caring responses right there in that community. There's a link to that community in the description below. It's my private Facebook group called Getting Pregnant Naturally. So you can see, I'm speaking to this stuff as a trained psychologist, and women who've been through this stuff, they know and they help each other. They support each other out. They support each other through these things. Okay, so that is a range of ways, so many ways. And as I mentioned before, we're having a candlelighting ceremony this evening. You can sign up for that in the description below. I want to also say a couple things about if and when you decide to try to get pregnant again. I feel like sometimes there can be an element of that first category I described, if I were to break it into 2 stages of grief, when we're trying to make sense out of things and grapple with it and get control. This is a very common occurrence. I experienced it myself, and I've seen it in other women. There's the shock of the loss, the processing of how do I get through this? Oftentimes, this is horrible. I will never try to get pregnant again because this was so painful. Never, never, never will I let this happen again. And sometimes that's surprisingly quickly followed up with, I will try again. We're going to do this. And it's almost I'm going to make this pain go away by having a successful pregnancy. And you can imagine some of the challenges of going through that process. And I would never take that away from somebody, because I think that can also be very empowering to say, I'm going to find my power. I'm going to get on my feet. I'm going to do this over again. And we're going to do it. It's going to come out differently this time. And that determination is partly, I don't want to feel that pain anymore, but it's also, I am resilient. I'm going to get up. I'm going to move forward. So it's a little bit complicated though, right? Because you can see how it can get tangled up with, I don't want to process that last loss. I'm going to make it go away by having another pregnancy. So my recommendation, having been on all sides of that myself, is I think it's okay to feel all those things. It's okay to grasp for control by thinking about how you're going to go about getting pregnant again. And I think it's also important to recognize that some of that is just our grappling with that there was a loss, and that we may or may not be able to change what's going to happen, affect what's going to happen next. And we can't change what has already happened. But it's okay to have those hopes and have those dreams and have that be part of your healing process. And at the same time, I want to encourage you to also keep in mind that you can benefit from having some time to heal, whether it's physically or emotionally, having a little time to collect yourself and not have to race into trying to conceive again the very next cycle. I went through 2 versions of that. After my first pregnancy, it was what I just described. No, I could never do this again. This is the end of my road. I'm going to have an only child, and that's just going to be it. No second child. It's not in the cards. Too quickly into, this is going to happen. I'm going to make this happen. it's going to happen. I'm going to set the due date for that next baby. We're going to make this happen right now. Like this ultra determination. As you know, my story, I had a second miscarriage. And after that, I was like, whoa, I was so depleted. And I really had to just step back from I'm going to make it right now and take some time to heal and restore. So I just want to offer that perspective that there is oftentimes that really strong urge to get pregnant again right away and not miss a cycle, not miss a chance to right what we've lost. But I also want to suggest that we want to find ways to also give time to process what has happened and not to just scurry right off and leave it in the dust as if it's not there anymore, but create space in whatever way makes sense for you to heal what has happened for you. And I think also, sometimes we talk about these things from an energetic and spiritual perspective of what is this about and who is this for and how much of this baby making becomes about healing ourselves versus creating a loving space to welcome a baby into. And is that the best setup? Is that how we want to set up the start for the baby that we want to invite in? Is it to soothe our pain and to fill a space? Or we want to do some of that healing and then from a place of wholeness and healedness, create a new space for the baby to come to. The other thing that I want to mention in terms of trying again is, as I mentioned before, a lot of times the issue around losses is around, a lot of times it's attributed to egg quality. And that is when the chromosomes of the egg that was released and fertilized were not developing properly. And that's why the pregnancy didn't continue. And until recently, it was largely thought that that was a totally random thing that gets more enhanced as we get older, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you can just keep rolling the dice, but you can't do anything about egg quality. It's a one-way street. It gets worse and worse as we get older. But more recent research that has been brought out is showing that that's not really the whole story, and there's potential to make healthy lifestyle changes and nourish your system in the way that's going to potentially create better quality eggs. So that is something that I find very empowering if you've been through a loss, and especially if you know that it was due to egg quality or you suspect that it may have been. This is something that you can start investing in yourself to nourish your system, to build up your health physically and emotionally with the intention that not only is that good for you and your healing as a person, but it can benefit your future fertility and a future pregnancy. I find this very empowering, and I've been building programs over the last few years to teach women how to go about that, how to think about that, how to learn more about your body and your fertility, to support, best support your optimal fertility and to best support your egg quality. So if you look around on my YouTube channel and on my website, you'll see lots of resources. I've got lots of free resources. I've listed some of them in the description below that you can link into to help with the healing process, with the preparing to get pregnant again process, that whole thing. So I'll just kind of walk through quickly the resources that I've linked below. I have several meditations that I think can be appropriate, whether or not you're trying to conceive again, but just for healing. So one is called Healing, another is called Mother's Heart, and there's one for Cultivating Bliss. These three, I think, are just as appropriate for supporting fertility as they are for healing, even if you're not trying to conceive again at this time. And then I have a collection called the Somatic Listening collection. And this is about, so the exercise we did, if you were here earlier, place your hand over your heart or over your body and listen to those emotions, using actually touch and awareness to soothe those emotions where they reside in your body. And that is a technique that I have developed, and I call it Somatic Listening. And I've made a series of recordings to guide you through that. And that is on my Harmony Within YouTube channel, not fertility related, it's for anybody for any kind of emotional processing. So that playlist is linked below. I also have a program called the Fertile Mindset Guided Tour, and that is designed to help you with shifting away from negative expectations and really kind of embrace more hopeful and expansive outlook about your body, about pregnancy, about your own resilience. And it walks you through all the different meditations on my fertility channel and some on my other channel that I feel are really nice set to be connected with. And when you get introduced to all of them, you can figure out which ones you'd like to come back to. So that that program is linked below as well. And then I have a set of affirmations for improving egg quality that you might enjoy listening to if you want to prepare for a future pregnancy. And that's all about nurturing your body, healthy lifestyle, and having those positive images of creating a healthy space for your baby to develop in. What else? So please, if you've enjoyed this and you'd like to stay connected, subscribe to this channel. You can sign up for that Fertility Mindset Guided Tour. I have a 7-day TTC Chill Out Challenge that has been very well received over the last year. I've offered it 8 times now. The 9th one is going to be coming up probably in November. So you can sign up for the wait list for that. And I have a full membership program with over 100 women supporting each other through all the ups and downs of their fertility journey. And that is something that if you're interested in it, I don't know if there's anybody here in the chat right now who is in it and wants to share anything about that, but that's something, if you're interested in it, you need to do the 7-day challenge first. It's sort of like an intro course, really, to the rest of what I offer. So keep your eyes open for the 7-day challenge if you'd like to go deeper with the trying to conceive support. And after that challenge, then we offer you an opportunity to sign up for the other courses and the membership around supporting your fertility and improving your egg quality and so forth. Okay, I am going to look at the chat now. What do we have here? Aaron says, my husband looked at me oddly the other day when I pointed out a very pregnant woman and said, that's what I would look like if we hadn't lost the baby in February. Yeah. So there are always all these reminders when you've lost the pregnancy, like all the dates you had set in your mind, right? Like, okay, this is the due date. And invariably, I don't know, I think it's almost inevitable. You're going to have friends who are due the same day as your loss, and then you're going to get invited to their baby showers, and then you're going to want to show up for them. I had four friends who were due the same time as my due date for my first loss. Oh my goodness. And they were, 3 of them were close friends. I went to all their baby showers. That was a season of did a lot of emotional work to be there for myself and others. Tough times. Tabo says, I was due in June, and when I told my partner, he looked at me and he said, this is getting cut off. I can't quite read what that says. Amy says, you have my permission. Okay, I shared Amy's comment earlier about how she copes, and it was really beautiful. Thank you to all the comments on the Facebook group and on here. Even though our hearts were broken, it is so wonderful to be part of such a beautiful group. Thank you, Amy. I know that's why I love doing these events where we actually get to come together and interact in the chat or in the event later today. We're going to actually be able to see each other face to face. Little Miss Goldilocks says, in a time of our lives that feels so lonely, it's nice to remember that we're not alone. Yes, this is so true. And this is why I think it's so important to bring these conversations out, as hard as they are. Heck, you're all here because you've been through something like this. Why do we need to be so hush-hush about it, right? And and then this is something we can do for each other. This is loss awareness day, but next week we can still have awareness, and the week after that. And you can always check in with a friend and just say, I know that you've been through such and such, I've been through some stuff too. How are you doing? Just open up the conversation. If somebody wants to go there, then they have permission. They have an invitation to share. Nino says, thanks for talking about finding the time to heal and to try to conceive later. I think I have been so obsessed about having a baby, I forgot to heal before. Yeah. And Nino says, I fully recommend the 7 days program. Okay, you've been through the program. Wonderful. And Little Miss Goldilocks says, how did you do that? You're talking about going to all the baby showers? You're a strong woman. Yeah, well, I wanted to, these were good friends and they knew what I had been through. So it was hard for them too. They knew what I had been through, and they wanted to, celebrate their coming into motherhood. They were all having their first babies, and they were aware of my pain as well, and they didn't want to exclude me, and I didn't want to be excluded. It's something that, and I try to teach this in my community, how we can't, it's not about everybody feeling good all the time. Some of life is hard, but what we can do, like somebody said earlier, is not be alone, and if we can have the courage to show up and go, yeah, this is hard, but we're here together. You're about to have your baby. I'm not. We were friends. Gosh, we could have been together. How amazing that would have been. One of them was a really close friend, and I was so excited. We shared with each other our news. Well, I think, I don't remember if she called me to tell me first or I called her, but I think she told me she was pregnant. We were both at like 7 weeks or something. And I was like, me too. And we calculated our due dates and we were like a week or two apart. It was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so amazing to go through this. And then 2 weeks later, I was miscarrying, so the universe sends us these challenges, and then we find our way through. Okay, Art Chase says, where can we find the fertility mindset and the 7-day challenge? The fertility mindset program, you see a link right in the description below this video. It should be there right now. If it's not, let me know. And the 7-day challenge, I don't think I linked it there, but if you just go to my website, fertilityfromthesoul.com, you'll see, go to resources, and you'll see all of my programs there. That's probably the best way to see everything. You could also go to fertilityfromthesoul.com. I'm just going to type it in here. What am I doing? Use technology. www.fertilityfromthesoul.com/7-day-chill. There, easy address. Aaron, I've greatly appreciated the Conceive with Ease program. I'm so glad to hear that, Aaron. Allie says, I think many people feel pressured because of a stat floating around that you're more fertile for 3 months after a loss. I don't know if that's accurate, but it makes me feel like I need to rush. Thank you for bringing that up. I was aware of that statistic too, and I definitely felt that pressure. You type A women trying to figure out how to manage everything and do everything efficiently. We get on the internet, we find out what all the statistics are, we figure out how to increase the odds. And yeah, you've probably seen that there's some statistic that your fertility is a little bit higher after a miscarriage. So was it for the first 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months? And I remember seeing the statistic, and it wasn't that much higher, but it was a little bit higher, but enough to make you think, well, gee, I really should. Like, what if I let 3 whole months go by and I missed that window? Wouldn't that be a travesty? Wouldn't that be foolish? And, everybody has to make their own choices and weigh those things. I really suggest kind of getting into a meditative state and listening to your intuition, because nobody can tell you how many more cycles lie ahead. A lot of people have a fear that it drops off a cliff and next month might be your last egg. I really don't think it works that way. Eventually there will be a last egg, but I think there's a lot more gradual slide into cycle irregularities and so forth. So it's hard to know if your cycles are very irregular and you feel like you're really coming toward the end of your window. It's hard to know how many more cycles you might have left that could be fertile. But if you're having regular cycles with regular ovulation, I would really guess that it's not dropping off a cliff sometime in the next few minutes. And that urgency to hurry up because of heightened fertility, I mean, what's the trade-off? It's creating a certain stress in our bodies that could then be affecting our fertility, because we also have data that when you have higher stress levels, it takes longer to get pregnant. So I've read those studies in detail to see if that's a thing, and it is. They looked at women in their middle childbearing years and found out it took them a few months longer to get pregnant if they had a lot of stress in their lives. So you balance all these things together and honor your own, at some point you have to decide, how much am I going to let the clock and the statistics chase me down? And at what point am I going to say, okay, I'm just going to claim some space for myself and my healing. And that's really what happened to me after I went through the 2 miscarriages. My 2 miscarriages were well into my first trimester. And I did go from one right into the other. I had the first miscarriage. I tried the next cycle, but I don't think it was an ovulatory cycle. I tried the following cycle. I got pregnant. So I really only had a month in between pregnancies. And then my second pregnancy came up as a miscarriage at 9 weeks, but I didn't actually have the miscarriage until 12 weeks. So I was pregnant and miscarrying over the course of like 4 or 5 months, 6 months of, pregnancies and miscarriage. And at that point, I was so fully depleted that I didn't have to sit and meditate and check my intuition to know that I had to do a full stop and replenish myself. It was so obvious to me. I was like, zero energy at that point, emotionally, physically, totally spent. I was like, how am I going to grow a baby from this? That's not happening. So I did take off 3 months. 3 months when I was about to turn 46, I took off 3 months because I just felt clarity in myself that that's what my name, that's my intuition told me. And nobody in the fertility world with a calendar and looking at my birth date would have said, take off 3 months, probably. Some people might have, but most would have said, no, don't do that. It might be your last month, So nobody can tell you what's going to be best for you, but I encourage you to keep in mind your needs to be whole, to be nourished, and to have that full well from which to grow new life, and to not run yourself down trying to race to this finish line. All right. Any other comments or questions anybody has? I'm watching the chat to see if anything is coming up here. It has been a real pleasure and an honor for me to take this time to be with all of you here today. Please do stay in touch. Let me know how things are going. Subscribe to this channel if you want to see notifications when live streams like this come up or when I release new videos. And join that private Facebook group. I'm in there pretty regularly, interacting and sharing about new things that are coming up with Fertility from the Soul. So thank you everybody for being here. If you want to attend the candle lighting circle, that's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern time. If you're watching live, this date hasn't already passed, please register for that and you will get an email. I realized that I had impeccable scheduling wisdom, and I booked myself up against 2 other things that are happening tonight related to the US election. We have town hall meetings live for Donald Trump on one channel and Joe Biden on the other channel. And we will be on our own channel doing our women thing, supporting each other, bringing love and light and healing. So you have a few choices at 8 p.m. Eastern time. If you're not in Europe, you should be sleeping if you're in Europe. But for those in awake time zones, you have some choices. And if you choose to join me, that would be lovely. But know that, whatever healing path you're taking is unique to you. And I support you. I encourage you. I'm sending you a lot of love and light along your path. Thank you all who have been sharing. Amy says she's having a break from TTC. It's the best advice I've followed. I think I've achieved chill out. Yes, wonderful. Nito says, thanks for this time. I really appreciate it. I feel recognized in some of the things you said. My heart is vulnerable but light tonight. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Okay, take care, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day and bring lots of healing, love, and light into your heart and into your womb. Take care.